Hello, and welcome back to Discovering Nutrition with Cronometer. I'm Eliisa, and today we're diving into a topic that completely surprised me. I've worked at Cronometer for 8 years. I live and breathe micronutrients, daily nutrient tracking, and nerdy nutrition research. And until recently, I'd never even heard of Phytate. My guest today is Amy Puzey, a holistic nutritionist, researcher, and founder and CEO of Good Phyte. Amy's journey into nutrition started in nursing, but her curiosity about preventative health led her down a very different path, one that ultimately uncovered the role of an enzyme called phytase in breaking down phytate, an anti-nutrient found in grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds that can actually block mineral absorption. Say what? I know. She's also a competitive trail runner and former race director, and her work sits right in that intersection of science, performance, and real-world health. Her research explores how improving nutrient absorption could impact everything from energy and digestion to autoimmune conditions and a global micronutrient deficiency. In this episode, we unpack what phytate actually is, why so many people may unknowingly be under-absorbing key nutrients like iron, zinc, and magnesium, and how food preparation, enzymes, and modern diets intersect with long-term health. As always, this podcast is for general purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace personalized medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your diet or supplementation routine. Okay, let's get into this one. So, we have an expert here today. We got to have a chat a little while ago about phytate, which was awesome because I know nothing about phytase at all. So we have an expert on the topic here, and I'm really excited to dive into this one because we are soon going to be incorporating phytate tracking into Cronometer. So, like myself, other people might be wondering what phytate is. Amy, could you please take it away, introduce yourself, tell us how you've landed in this very interesting work and what this nutrient or anti-nutrient is.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I think it's amazing that you guys are going to start tracking phytate. You're definitely at the cutting edge of a very, very important piece of the nutrition puzzle and the whole immune system puzzle. So well done. My background is in nursing and nutrition, and I started researching phytase, which is the enzyme that breaks down phytic acid or phytate, back in 2008. I've sort of been doing that since then. I didn't start our company until 2019, and I was actually a race director and used to work out of Revelstoke for a little while as well, and owned a running trail race company for a long time. But this always was in the back of my mind, just understanding phytase and phytate and the impact it could have on nutrition. So high level, what is phytate? Phytate is known to be, for the most part, to be an anti-nutrient. And so what that means is that it binds to micronutrients in your body and it prevents your body from absorbing them. So the most important ones are zinc, iron, calcium, magnesium, but also amino acids and protein. So it's kind of the way that the plant protects itself from being eaten before it has a chance to sprout. There are benefits to phytate or phytic acid, but it's mostly when it gets into the cell outside of the digestive tract that's where you start seeing the benefits. So my research has been mainly on phytase, the enzyme that works against phytic acid. So I would say phytate is not necessarily an anti-nutrient. If you break it down, it becomes a source of nutrients, becomes a source of phosphate, which you need for ATP and DNA, and a number of other, I'm going to have to edit that out, a number of other pathways in the body. It's really important to have phosphate and also inositol, which is sort of the chemical structure of phytate, is inositol with phosphate attached to it. So it is both an anti-nutrient if you don't treat it properly, and it's a source of nutrients if you break it down.
For me, this podcast, as I was saying off air, is so fascinating because I am coming at this as someone who's tracked the nutrition for a very long time. I told Amy the exact amount of years, but don't really need to do that on air. But I've never heard up until our initial conversation about phytate or phytase at all. And I'm wondering why. Like, why do you think that this is something that just hasn't gotten any attention? I mean, it has from you, obviously, but you sound like an outlier. So
I get asked that quite often, and I don't truly know the answer to that. So phytase is an enzyme that's produced through fermentation. So traditional ways of eating a lot of foods, a lot of plant foods, we would have fermented them, right? So tempeh, miso, sourdough bread, kimchi, they were part of so many traditional diets. So I don't think that it was necessarily focused on or isolated. Phytase has been used in human nutrition since like the 1950s or 60s. They were using it to prevent algae blooms in the Netherlands. So they were finding that all this phosphate was running off through humans because they weren't absorbing it out of the plants. And it was going into the waterways and causing algae blooms because of all the excess phosphate going in. So it's been used in human nutrition for a long time. Once they realized that, then they started using it in agriculture and animal nutrition for the same reasons. So when you think of cows and pigs and chickens, and they can't absorb the phosphate either. So cows can, they're ruminants, but pigs and chicken and fish can't. So they have one stomach, monogastrics. They can't absorb phosphate without the use of phytase. So they started adding it into animal feed to prevent phosphate runoff into the water. But then there's, I think, 6,000 studies on phytase use in animals and all the health benefits, but like 12 in humans. So I don't know why there hasn't been more attention paid to that. And like I said, I was just at a nutrition congress in Paris, and there were a few meetings on it. But given the impact it can have on nutrient bioavailability, it's shocking that there isn't more being done in this area. So that's part of my mission is bringing that awareness to the world and teaching people about it.
Hopefully that's part of our mission too. And from the small amount of research that I've done on this, I'm actually on a personal level pretty excited about this because from what I've read, and I'm getting ahead of myself as per usual, but a lot of the foods that I consume seem to potentially be high in phytate. So this will be something I am really curious about myself. So again, getting ahead of myself, but what is the importance of phytate in our food specifically?
So phytate is the storage form of phosphorus in a plant. So in all beans and grains and nuts and seeds, it protects that seed from any other animal eating it before it has a chance to sprout. So it goes into the ground, the enzymes activate it, and then the coating around that seed breaks and the germ can get out. And then all the nutrients are used by that germ. So again, for humans, if you can break that down with the enzyme, you also can have access to those nutrients as well if you're going to be eating those plant foods.
Wild. Okay, that's really cool. Based on the standard Western diet, I'll say, how much phytate do you think people are consuming on average per day? And can you give me a little bit of a look at, like, you did briefly just touch on it, but what foods are primarily contributing to phytate consumption?
Most of the research out there says that kind of standard American diet, we would be eating roughly 600 to 800 units of phytate per day or milligrams of phytate per day. If you're eating vegan or vegetarian or mainly plant-based food, you're probably getting anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 units a day. So someone living on a subsistence diet, for example, that's literally just eating grain and doesn't have any access to fresh fruits and vegetables or to meat or really good fats, they're getting those higher amounts of phytate in their diet. But again, I mean, in North America, if you're eating oatmeal for breakfast, then you're having, say, rice or pasta for lunch, and then you're having like pizza for dinner, which a lot of people there are a lot of people that rely very heavily on grain of any kind. You're getting probably that same high amount of phytic acid. And I think about I come from a running background, and runners are always encouraged to eat massive amounts of carbohydrates, right? And carbohydrates being grains and rice and pasta and crackers and, not that they aren't eating fruits and vegetables, which are obviously also carbohydrates, but really relying on those sort of neo-carbs, the newer carbohydrates that have just been around since the advent of agriculture, that are mainly grain-based. So the foods that are highest in phytic acid or phytate are anything that's a seed, so even fruit seeds. And then most vegetables. But high ones would be like nuts and seeds. So any of the nuts and seeds, cashews, peanuts, peanut butter, and then grains. So all grains, quinoa, rice, kamut, spelt, wheat, obviously, oatmeal, all very high in phytic acid. And then lentils, legumes, all of those as well, chickpeas, beans, all of that. So yeah, if you're vegetarian, you're getting a lot of phytic acid.
I was a vegetarian for years and still don't consume a lot of meat at all. It's very seldom, but everything you just described is typically my diet, if I'm being honest. So I'm going to be very interested to see what my Cronometer diary tells me about my own phytate consumption. At this level of intake, how strongly does it reduce the absorption of the minerals you mentioned? And I guess what I'm wondering, is it the same across the board, or does this number vary like person to person?
So the number that you're consuming will vary, right? Nobody eats the exact same thing every day. We don't all eat the same quantities. Like some days you're hungry, some days you're not. In terms of how strongly it binds to the minerals, the most significant binding happens with zinc, which is a really key piece of the immune system and is a cofactor in so many enzymatic reactions in our body. It's critical to preventing viruses from getting into cells, viral replication, hair loss, mental health. You know all this about minerals. So anyways, so basically if there's literally the tiniest amount of phytic acid in your gut, it will bind to zinc. And not only will it bind to the zinc from your food, but it binds even more strongly to the endogenous pool of zinc, which is 2 to 4 times higher than anything you could consume in your food. So your zinc recycling system in your body, that's really critical to the immune system and all those enzymatic reactions. If you're consuming phytate, it's also binding to that endogenous pool, that internal pool of zinc. So it's not just your food, like you're screwed. and the tiniest amounts. The other piece is the iron. So particularly for athletes, for women, for pregnant women, going into menopause, like women are constantly exhausted and burnt out. And a lot of that can be, 1 in 3 women is iron deficient. And a lot of women, I think, are eating more plant-based foods. And so again, if you're eating high doses of phytic acid, it's just going to and you're not eating meat or heme iron, it's just going to keep binding to the iron you're consuming and preventing it from getting into your cells and your body from using it. So it is very significant, but it's the way, if you think of an animal running away from a predator, the animal can run, the plant can't run, right? And I'm not saying don't eat plants. I absolutely love all plant foods, but I also break it down using the phytase enzyme. Mm-hmm. So all those foods are really good for you. They're really full of nutrients, really, really important. As long as you are either preparing it properly using like soaking, fermenting, sprouting, of all of them for the appropriate amounts of time to fully break down that phytic acid, or you're taking an enzyme supplement with it to be able to break it down. Because again, even the tiniest amounts are really going to bind to those super critical micronutrients in your body.
One of the things that I found most interesting about my own nutrition is I, for example, am not anemic, but definitely have less iron, which you touched on. That seems to be typical for women. Unsurprising. It's been something I've kind of dealt with my whole life, and not eating, like, I don't eat any red meat. So, again, unsurprising. But it's a nutrient that I specifically do pay attention to in Chronometer to make sure I am getting enough. And then what's interesting about what you're telling me is that just because I'm consuming, X amount of milligrams of iron doesn't mean that that's what I'm absorbing. And my diet, by its very nature, with probably high phytate consumption, is, not helping that. But there's no way of me up until this point, by not having nutrient data on phytate, to be able to really understand that balance. So I wonder if there's a lot of people out in the world that are like me that have some kind of mineral deficiency, try their best to rectify it through their diet or supplementation, and then they go get, subsequent blood panels done and the needle's not moving. And I wonder if, that could be because of what you're telling me about phytic acid. So do you think that's playing a role?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of women who, I would say 95% of the women I talk to are exhausted all the time. And you talk to them about iron, and most of them say, yeah, I'm iron deficient, but I can't take iron supplements because they make me sick, they constipate me, they make me nauseous, right? So this is a very, very common, very common problem. And yeah, I mean, if I had to take iron, and I have, way back when I was running competitively, I was always anemic, and I hated taking iron supplements. Number one, they took forever to work. And so by the time I realized I was anemic, if I had a big race coming up, I didn't have time to get my iron levels up. And number two, taking them, to be constipated and nauseous all the time versus tired and feeling like I'm not running well or not performing well, mental fog, I don't know. It's kind of, which is the lesser of two evils. It doesn't seem like a very fair, it's not fair to a fair choice for women to have to make that decision, right? So, and the other piece that's really critical, and this is new research that's coming out now, is adding a whole bunch of exogenous iron to the body, to women. If it's not getting into the cells, then it's called NTBI, which is non-transferrin bound iron. And it's just floating around in your blood. And then it's at times deposited in really erroneous areas like your brain, which then leads to neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And so they're linking all of that now, and oxidative stress. So it's not necessarily the best to just supplement with a whole bunch of iron if you can't absorb it. And it's really interesting so we're talking to some groups that work in hidden hunger and malnutrition and sort of resource poor settings, or people that are relying on subsistence diets. And they have what's called MMS, which is a multiple micronutrient supplement for women that are pregnant to make sure that they have healthy babies. And they've done studies where they've just kind of, it's called the PEMBA study. So they gave everybody, 50,000 people in PEMBA, a whole bunch of iron. And they had to stop the study early because so many children and people were dying of malaria, because the malaria parasite actually feeds on iron. And so they were putting all this iron in, and they hadn't even checked everybody's baseline iron levels. But again, if you're not absorbing it, it's not doing you any good. So it doesn't matter whether it's your protein, your amino acids, everybody across the board. We all spend so much money. We try so hard to eat well. You think you're doing well. You spend all this time preparing and shopping and cooking and all of this for your kids, for yourself, for everybody. But none of that matters if you're not absorbing it, right? It's just going to go right through you, or it's going to attach to the phytic acid, and that just gets pulled out of your system. So it's really not about what you're eating. It's about what you're absorbing. And I think that's the really important message to help people understand.
I think that is really important. And I think that nutrition is so nuanced. There's so much going on behind the scenes about how we absorb things individually, and I always encourage people to use trial and error, because things don't work for everybody across the board. But yeah, I'm feeling quite mind blown, honestly, because for me, even, for example, I know that, from what I understand, please always correct me if I say something wrong. From what I understand, that vitamin C helps iron absorption. So when I'm talking to my friends, women who are borderline anemic like me, I'm like, they see me as someone who knows more about nutrition than the layperson, which, whatever, that's fair. This is my job. So I'm like, make sure that, that you're having it with vitamin C. But now I feel like make sure that you're taking it with phytase supplement might be better, like we think that we're doing the best that we can, and then finding out that maybe there's other things at play that are hindering us. And even though, like, past Eliisa is sad that I didn't have that knowledge or that information before, like, we're recording this, I think that in the future, having it is what counts, the best time to have good information is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. So I think this will really help me move forward with my own nutrition tracking, because iron specifically is an issue for me. Zinc too, though, really loving zinc lately. I've been really on the ball with zinc intake when I feel like I'm getting sick. One of my coworkers actually was like talking about the supplement that he takes when he like feels like the niggle in his throat. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Obviously I believe in, nutrition is medicine. So I started using the same supplement, which is honestly, it's just vitamin C, zinc, and vitamin D. And it's done wonders for me. So zinc is also now near and dear to my heart. So
it's so critical for respiratory illness, for the flu. So if you can achieve zinc homeostasis in your body, then viruses can't get in and they can't replicate. But that you can't do that when phytic acid is present. That's the big thing. So again, you can put the zinc in, but there's something called the phytate to zinc molar ratio. And so if there's a calculation you can do that Dr. Oberleis coined way back in like the 80s when he was looking at all these cereal companies and how much phytic acid people were eating. So if you're eating mass amounts of phytic acid and you're getting a little bit of zinc, again, all that phytic acid is binding. So it's the ratio that's really important to understand. And there are molar ratios for iron and magnesium and calcium as well. But that's getting pretty deep in the weeds. But for the most part, again, if you can just liberate all of those micronutrients, it's really helpful. And the protein and the amino acids are really important as well. Like that's building blocks for DNA, right? So it's if you're eating high protein and you're not absorbing what you could be, again, it's just kind of going right through you. So, but yeah, it is a very common, in the running world, I would say in the groups that I was in, even the men were anemic because running, you get that added. So for women, you're kind of always hooped. I think 50% of female runners are anemic at all times. And it's because partly you get the foot strike hemolysis. So every time your foot hits the ground, so this is any running sport, every time your foot hits the ground, the blood vessels break in the bottom of your foot. And that can deplete your iron. Sweat can deplete your iron. So any athlete. And then menstruation, of course. And then if you've also got that added like super high phytic acid diet, I don't know how you could possibly have ideal iron levels in your body, right? So, I had friends that they'd go get their ferritin checked and they were at like a 4, and you should be at a 50 for as an athlete to be performing well. So functioning at a 4, and they were still running these big ultra races. I'm like, how are you functional?
I think mine was 13 last time I got a blood panel done. And same, you know what's funny? Today I always try to go for a run before a pod because I just get in flow state and then I'm like, I'll be a better host. Today I was joking around that I ran a PW, which is a personal worst. I'm sure someone else has coined that, but I was like, I had to walk for the first time in probably a year and a half, honestly. Like, I'm someone that, like, when I'm running, I'm like, you don't walk, Eliisa. And I had to walk and I was just gassed, but I ran like 28 days, I think, in the month of September. And then I've like continued that. I wanted to run every day for the month of September, but then I moved into a new house. And so that was off the table. But yeah, I was like looking, it's funny because I was then like looking at the data, you know, and I'm like, my HRV last night was good, had good sleep, didn't exercise the day before, like calorie consumption was like normal. And they're like, why do you feel like garbage? And now I'm having this very timely conversation with you, Amy. And I'm like,
might want to get that checked.
maybe I should go back and get that checked. But I digress. Do you have a rule of thumb? This might be a hard question to answer because I'm probably going to butcher how I'm asking it. But is there like a certain amount of phytate that you're consuming which will reduce absorption of these minerals by a certain percentage? Like the more phytate you had, the more reduction in absorption, or does it not work like that?
I don't have those specific numbers in front of me. What I know is that by taking adequate phytase, that you can increase your iron absorption by up to 150%. So we did a literature review that's published in the journal Nutrients. So you can increase iron absorption by up to 150% within a few days, and zinc by up to 86%. So I guess I kind of know the opposite. My work has really been focused more on the enzyme.
Right.
Understanding the anti-nutrient, but really how to counteract that more than... So I'm sorry, I don't know that answer.
No, I think that's helpful because you do know the other side. So you have like the silver lining for us. I guess you have the solution to the problem, which I think is super important. And I do want to definitely dive into your supplements soon because obviously I need to start taking them. I do have a couple more questions though. So you mentioned that we can prepare food that could eliminate the amount of phytate. Is that right? If we use soaking lint, can you just tell us about like meal preparation and a couple things that people can do to their food in preparation to reduce this?
Yeah. So a lot of these would be like traditional recipes, right? So partly eating fermented foods like sauerkraut, which is a really easy thing to do. I didn't start it until about a year ago, but it is so easy. It's just cabbage and salt and you put it in your fridge. And it's actually kind of fun to do. So having fermented foods in your diet is really helpful. But then when you're fermenting like your beans, your lentils, your nuts and seeds, so you wouldn't want to be like I used to eat raw almonds thinking, well, raw is better. Raw always is better. Raw vegetables, raw fruit, you get all the enzymes, right? But in this case, actually to deplete that phytic acid, you would want to be soaking and sprouting or cooking it. So every different seed has a whole variety of different soaking or sprouting times. And of course, when I was a teenager, I was vegetarian and I thought, like, why would I soak my beans? What a stupid thing to do. Who does that? Like, that's an old grandmother's thing to do. But there's so much wisdom in it. And I have no idea how people knew to do it or where that originated. That's what really fascinates me. And I can't find the origin of how someone figured out, other than that sometimes produces alcohol. Like if you make a sour porridge, it basically turns it into beer. So maybe there was that's where they went with it. But somehow they knew to ferment food. And it's in every single culture. And I'm just so fascinated. If somebody has an answer to that, I would love to know because I can't find anything in historical texts. But anyways, so you want to be, you'll need to look that up. You can get cookbooks about fermentation and you'd want to look up each specific seed or bean about how you're going to be cooking or soaking or sprouting it. But then I guess, when you're eating processed foods like bread, if you're not eating sourdough bread, then it's going to be quite high in phytic acid as well. So any of those processed foods are, again, the origin is kind of the wheat, right? So it's going to be very high in phytic acid.
Interesting. Are there populations that are affected more by phytic acid? Like you mentioned, obviously, athletes, maybe plant-based eaters. What about people with digestive sensitivities? Or is it just kind of the same across the board?
So if you have like IBS, for example, if you're kind of alternating between constipation and diarrhea, certainly if you have diarrhea more often than constipation, then your food isn't going to be getting absorbed, or nutrients won't be absorbed. People with inflammatory bowel disease, so Crohn's or colitis, have absorption issues. People with cancer, athletes have a very high demand for nutrients because they're just constantly putting their body under so much stress. So you definitely have a higher need for nutrients. Pregnancy, you have a higher need for nutrients because all of the nutrients go to the baby, but mom doesn't get prioritized, right? So you know how, so I have 4 kids. So every time I was pregnant, I would get horrible cramping in the middle of the night, and I had to take extra magnesium to help with the cramping in my legs because all of the calcium and magnesium is going to the baby, and mom gets whatever's left. Sorry. So if your diet's not really optimal. Also, as you age, your absorption decreases. So you have a higher need specifically for zinc. And then interestingly, and this is always one that is a little awkward, but men lose quite a bit of zinc every time they ejaculate. So they have a higher need for zinc. And so it's really important that they replace that just for their immune systems. So, yeah,
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
What a great tip for all of our male listeners.
All the guys, their ears perk up while they're listening.
Honestly, that's probably going to become an Instagram short. Just that sentence, Amy. But I have no shame about anything anymore. Like I did a podcast with a registered dietitian that like really specializes in like fiber and bowel movements, and I'm like, am I going to talk about my poop on a podcast? And I'm like, you know what? Yep. In for a penny. So no shame. I think it's helpful.
It is helpful. It's important for men to know that, right? And especially as you age, it's if you're eating a vegan diet, if you're an athlete, or you are in a very healthy relationship, then you'd want to make sure that you're getting enough zinc in your diet and that you're absorbing it. So, yeah.
Especially during cold and flu season, gentlemen. This is the time. That's great. Really love that. Actually, that's wonderful. You handled that so eloquently. Obviously,
well, I'm already way past talking about poop. I did that for 9 years as a nutritionist. That was like, the minute a client sat down, I was like, we're going to talk about poop. It's very important. It's important for elimination of all the toxins, and it's going to be a big piece of this. And it's shocking how many people go 3 days without pooping and think that that's normal, and then wonder why they feel so terrible all the time. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's me traveling. I think it was like over a week when I went to Iceland. I'm like, my body does not agree with time zone changes. I'm not sure what it is. But yeah, no. And I think maybe it's like an age thing, because I know when I was younger, I would have died to discuss anything like that. But now it's just like, this is a health marker to me. Maybe it's not that I've aged. Maybe it's that I'm just nerdier. So I'm like less apologetic about this.
The bodily function.
But I always think that and if I'm thinking it, then someone else is probably thinking it too. And I'll just be the one to raise my hand awkwardly in class and ask the question. Do you think then, with everything we've just learned from you, do you think that people should try to limit their intake of phytate, or do you think that people should be preparing their food through fermentation, soaking, or obviously supplementing phytase?
So I used to think that it was important to reduce the amount of phytic acid in your diet. About a year ago, we brought on the world's leading researcher in phytase research, but in the animal world. So he's been working in phytase research for 30 years. He's published 440 papers on it. So I mean, when I talk to him, I have to record our conversations and listen to them 5 more times after to understand everything he's saying. He's so smart.
Yeah.
So, but just since then, our understanding of phytase and phytic acid has just like increased exponentially. So I no longer think it's important to keep phytic acid out of the diet. I think, there's a lot of quote unquote anti-nutrients out there that people try to avoid. And I know a lot of people feel, especially if you have an autoimmune disease, which is where a lot of our research is now, a lot of people feel better when they go carnivore because they're avoiding a lot of those anti-nutrients that could be causing problems. So I think if you're not prepared to soak, sprout, ferment, or eat fermented foods, make sure your gut is, your microbiome is working properly, that you're absorbing properly, or that you're not using a phytase enzyme, then I do think it's important to limit the amount of phytic acid in your diet. But that being said, that's not the ideal situation. I think you should eat lots of plant foods for all their nutrient benefits, all the fiber you get from it. I think it's incredibly healthy. You just have to be able to break down that phytic acid. Does that make sense? So it's not the villain, it's the vault. Like phytic acid isn't a villain. It's just that it takes all your nutrients and it like literally puts them in a cage so you can't absorb them. So it's that enzyme that it unlocks the cage and liberates all the nutrients for you. So no, I think a plant-based diet is amazing, but only if you're willing to ferment, soak, sprout. And I don't know, personally, I don't have the counter space or the time to have like 8 to 10 different jars of things fermenting on my counter at all times. So I made something that is a lot simpler. You just take a couple capsules a day and you've got a controlled dose of it.
This is the best time to jump into Good Phyte. So I want you to tell me everything you're doing, all about your company. Tell me all of the details, because I think that you're right. I know myself quite well. I'm not going to soak things. I'm not going to ferment things. That's just not on the table for me. Half the time when I want to, take a supplement, I have to take like a gummy multivitamin. So I remember. So definitely the easier something is, I think the more likely I am to do it. So if you could tell us all about your company, because it's so fascinating.
Yeah. So like I said, it's research that started back in 2008. And I was just, I was really focused on HIV at the time and felt very called to kind of help in that disease specifically and in poverty alleviation ever since I was little. And I was reading a nutrition book, like a nerd at the time that I was always reading nutrition books like at night after work. And I started reading about phytic acid and I was like, okay, so I'm looking at this. I had 2 books open at the same time. And one of them was sort of a anthropological look at what people eat all over the world. They take pictures of what a family eats during the course of a week. So you see in every country how different it is. And I'm looking at a family in, I think it might have been Ghana. And it was like very, very heavy grain, right? So just big bags of grain and a little bit of oil and like maybe 1 chicken for the whole family. And then I'm looking at all this so phytic acid is this anti-nutrient that binds to all the micronutrients. And I'm going, well, how are they supposed to have any kind of immune system if that's all they're eating is just this really high phytic acid? So I went into the clinic that I was working in, and one of the doctors there was an immunologist. And I said, does this make any sense to you that this could be like impacting HIV? And anyways, that's where it all started. I developed a protocol with the Canadian Trials Network that tests different interventions on HIV patients. Worked with them for a while, but then I sort of got discouraged as a nutritionist. I'm not a PhD, I'm not a researcher, and I didn't really know what to do with it. So that's when I bought 5 Peaks and ran that for 9 years. But it just was always in the back of my mind, like knowing the impact this could have on specifically women and children, and knowing that 9,000 kids die every day of zinc-related deficiencies. Like as a mom, that's just really hard to handle. And the number of women that go into pregnancies without optimal nutrition, and then their babies are born without optimal nutrition and without the best chance at life, right? And that's where you get stunting and defects and failure to thrive and like severe wasting and all these issues. And that happens here and in developing countries. So in 2019, I just said, I can't, like, I feel immoral not doing this anymore because I've tried to give it away to so many research institutes, like somebody pay attention to this, and no one was doing it. So I just figured it out. I built the website. I sourced the enzyme and brought the product to market. And then shortly after that, we started hearing from people with autoimmune disease. One of the guys I used to run with at U of A actually has pretty severe Crohn's. And he contacted me and said, I don't flare anymore. And I've been able to gain 12 pounds since I started on your supplement. And my wife, who was very anemic, who I used to run with on our team, is no longer anemic. So then he started talking about it in the IBD community, and it started spreading. And since then we've had, lupus, MS is a big one, Crohn's, colitis, interestingly, type 1 diabetes. And we know now that's because when you break phytic acid all the way down to inositol is actually an insulin mimetic. So it means it mimics insulin. And so as you break phytic acid down, you get that inositol. Inositol is also very important for women in perimenopause and menopause. So really important for hormone balance. And yeah, so it's just really gone from there. And it's a really heavy lift to educate people about it because just like me, even going through a nutrition diploma, I'd never heard of it. And I knew all about digestive enzymes, but it's not known in the medical community. It's not known in the nutrition community. That's part of our work, is getting it out there. But it's, it's definitely a heavy lift trying to educate people.
We're happy to join the Good Phyte with you on this. Pun very, very much intended. Yeah, I'm really excited. I also just love that this was like on your heart for a long time and that you did it. I think that it's funny. That resonates with me, obviously not in such a philanthropic way. I really, appreciate what you're doing. But there's just some things that are just like every time I get in flow state, it's like I'm called to do something, and I think that those things should not be ignored. And look at what you've done for people already. Like that's the best thing for me about working at Cronometer by far is when somebody writes in, and I'm cheering for everybody in every walk of life, if they're losing 10 pounds and have had success. But it's like the people that like really move me are people that have had, they're on medication for X, Y, and Z. And because they started tracking their nutrition, they're able to be like free of medication, or it helped them, like alleviate symptoms or like reverse the potential for different kinds of like cardiovascular risk. And I'm just like, what we're doing is so meaningful. And I feel like what you're doing obviously is the same. I think it's incredible. I'm like hearing, you just mentioned the person that that had Crohn's and his wife, like, what does that mean for their lives going forward? Like the impact that you're making, like it's an easier, more comfortable, potentially longer life. Like that is beautiful. So
it's definitely a calling. Like I feel like it was given to me to take forward to wherever I have to get it to and hand off to the next person or people or group and like I said, it feels, my son was a year old in 2019 and it was like right before the pandemic and trying to manage 5 Peaks and going virtual and all of that through like the pandemic was pretty wild. Not the best time to start a company. But I just felt like I had to. I read this book. It was a children's book called What Do You Do with an Idea? And it was another, like, if I got that first intuitive hit or like download in 2008, then in 2019, again, it was like, you can't keep ignoring this. It has to be you. You have to do it too fucking bad. Like, you think this is going to be hard. It is. Too bad. Just do it. Like, your life is not hard. And, when I used to run races, I'd often think of Terry Fox, but I'd always think of people that were living in starvation and like get a bowl of rice a day. And that would really make me fight hard in my race. And so that keeps me going. But then when we get these stories, people write emails to us, like probably like what you're getting. We had a lady last week this is a few weeks ago. She wrote, and I can't remember how she heard about it, but she was in so much pain. I can't remember the name of her autoimmune disease. It was something quite rare. we sent this out in a newsletter, but she was in so much pain that she was alluding to like considering suicide. Like she was just, it was just too much. And she tried everything and nothing was working. And within a few days of taking this, her pain was gone. And like, that's miraculous. And so then I send that to our team, and we're a small team, but it keeps everybody going, you know? And when we get those emails from people that were on like massive amounts of drugs, or there was a guy who couldn't leave the house without adult diapers, and he was on 8 pills of prednisone every day, the max dose of Humira, which is a big immunosuppressant. He had to quit his job, so he's living in poverty, and he started taking Phytase, and 2 weeks later, his flares stopped. So that didn't mean he could go back to work, but he didn't have to wear diapers anymore. Like the quality of life for people. This is it, you know, every time I think this is hard and I want to quit, I remember one person, you know, it's that starfish story. Well, it made a difference to that person. And yes, I have big dreams for this, and I want to impact like 3 to 4 billion people that are suffering from micronutrient deficiency globally. But I have to stay focused on like, okay, well, it already has helped thousands of people with autoimmune disease or immunity issues or even just digestive issues. I mean, there's so many, 50,000 people in the States have IBS. And like the number of people you talk to that are so bloated at night, they don't want to go out. They don't want to see their friends. They can't put pants on. You know, like that's a common thing. That's awful to live that way. So just that type of stuff.
Yeah. I think we do live that way, though. I had stomach issues for a long time. My body doesn't digest, I think, the protein in garlic. I can't have garlic, basically, without, you know, blowing up like a hot air balloon. And it's funny that people just will like live with symptoms for a really long time, because I feel like stomach issues, and I talked about this I had a gastroenterologist on the podcast, and it's just something that people are like okay living with.
I don't know how.
And then, yeah, until you don't live like that anymore, because I actually used Chronometer to like find out what was causing me upset. And there's garlic in everything. So it was like quite a process. But when I finally pinpointed that, like my stomach issues by and large went away. And I'm like, I can't believe how uncomfortable I was for so long. And that's just, you know, like those, I mean, potentially maybe it was having adverse effects on my health long term. I can't be sure, but like the physical symptoms associated with that, not like that's priceless to me. So I can't even imagine if it was like an autoimmune disorder or something like IBS and then getting alleviation from those symptoms. So I'm just so motivated by people's success. And I'm like you, it's kind of humbling. Feeling really good in a body is not something that I take for granted because of the stories that I hear sometimes. And it's funny that you draw inspiration sometimes from like Terry Fox, because I do too. Whenever I'm like struggling on like a short run, I'm like you could have one leg and run across Canada doing a marathon every single day. And then I'm like, okay, toughen up, police, that you got this. But
yeah. It's our choice to suffer, right? Like we're choosing to go out there and suffer. Whereas some people, like, they don't have any extra energy to go for a run. Like that's where I kind of go, well, I don't have the luxury of, or they don't have the luxury of going for a run. When you have one bowl of rice, you're not going to waste your energy on a run. So then I'm like, shut up, self, just shut up, keep running, stop complaining.
Even having like 2 legs that like swing over my bed in the morning. Sometimes I'm just like, remember I wrote a love letter to my legs a number of years ago, just because I'm so grateful that I'm even in a position to have a body that functions. So, but that said, you know, listening to you speak, knowing my own diet, I can only imagine. I'm really excited to track my own Phytate consumption and then subsequently support you in your business and use your supplement to see how my own health is impacted, because I suspect, based on everything you've told me, that I'm getting quite a bit of Phytate intake. So you don't think that people, though, should be limiting it. So is there, when it comes to your supplement, trying to think how to eloquently word this, is it like you see X amount of intake of phytate, so you take X amount of phytase, or what does supplementing actually look like? Is it like a universal dose, or something that the more phytate you're consuming, the more phytase you should also consume?
Yeah, so it's about a 1-to-1 ratio. So phytase is measured in FTU, or phytase units. So you'll see that on our bottles. So each of our capsules is 800 FTUs. So if you're eating, if Chronometer is telling you that you're eating 800 milligrams of phytate, then you would want to use the equivalent of phytase to break that down. So the EFSA and the FDA and international publications, the safety dose for phytase is 900,000 units a day. So like you cannot overdose on phytase. Like it's the safest enzyme out there. You're just going to absorb more protein, but like not toxic levels to your kidneys or anything, like just the normal native amount out of your food. So I would personally say it's safer to do more than less. So most people take 2 capsules a day. If they have an autoimmune disease, it seems that they need 3 to 4 per day. We've got some theories on what's happening in autoimmune disease and how that's all working, but it's not proven yet. We're doing a study in Greece right now on Crohn's, colitis, anemia, and MS. So we'll have results for that in early 26. But I would say, yeah, in general, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio if you're going to be taking the enzyme. So if Chronometer's telling you like you're eating 2,200 a day because you're mainly vegan, plant-based, then I would be taking at least 2,200 of the phytase to counteract that. And if, everybody's a little bit different, they might need a little more, a little less. So just start slowly like anything, right? Start with 1 and do that for a few days and then take a few more. Most people, because of the excess phosphate that actually is getting into your cells and helping with ATP, they're going to find they feel a big energy boost quite quickly. That's typically the fastest and most common response we hear quickly. And then the balancing of all the micronutrient issues typically takes like a few weeks to a few months for most people. But it works a lot faster than an iron supplement. So your iron levels would go up within a few weeks versus having to wait like 3 months.
You just answered the questions I was going to ask. You're a mind reader. I think that's really cool. I'm actually on the cusp of getting some blood panels done because I'm going to see if I can correct some of primarily my iron deficiency through like really rigorous intake. And Chronometer is kind of, I'm sure you've been paying attention because you're in the health space, but there's a lot of emphasis on like preventative medicine right now, obviously, which is great. There's like Function Health, which is the United States. They kind of like will run like a myriad of tests and then you know where you stand. So I kind of want to like dive into that side, see what that like, I want to get testing done and then see if I can just really find myself in like optimal health and nutrition. So it'd be really interesting after I get my blood panel done. I'll have to get some of your supplement and see and take it.
Yeah, give it a few weeks or a few months and do it again.
Yeah, because I'm going to do a follow-up and it would be really cool because honestly, I don't know what it feels like to exist at a normal iron level. And I think that I have actually quite a bit of energy if I'm being fair. Like I don't usually like bonk anymore. I think it's because I learned like nutrient timing and I'm like pretty well fed. But I can only imagine how much more obnoxious I'm going to be if I don't have an iron deficiency and I have more energy. So
yeah, it's like what you were talking about with you don't know how good you felt, when you were bloated all the time. You're just functioning at this normal level that you think is normal. But then when you remove that barrier, that block to all your nutrients, all of a sudden you've got all of them and your body just rebalances everything, right? Because it's now available from all the really good food you're eating. You're actually absorbing it. So it's like a whole other level of functioning. I'd love to hear what happens with your blood work. We do hear that quite often from people. We have some doctors that are recommending it for anemia now. So instead of going for irons, yeah, it's great. Good. It's really great because they're seeing the results, right? So they're like, well, not going to put somebody on iron when it doesn't work. It takes months. They just tell them to go get phytase. So
I think that's incredible. Like, even the amount, I feel like the knowledge that you've had or the research you're diving into since you and I chatted is like, you've come a long way even in that time, in terms of like participating in studies and obviously hiring this expert. And yeah, I think you're going to take the world by storm here, which is going to be great to see firsthand. I'm happy that we're on board with this. And I don't know, because I'd have to talk to Erin about it, but I don't know if this would be something we'd be tracking if we didn't know you.
Oh.
Like if we would have been adding this nutrient, like I had the call with you and then I talked to Karen and I talked to Erin and I was like, why aren't we doing this yet? Or like, why have I not heard about this was more
right.
the primary question. So hopefully there's a future where everybody knows, and that's because you read a book in 2019 to your child.
Well, I think it's amazing that you're doing it, because we can also send all of our customers to Chronometer now. Like, there's no way for, even when Mike talks about it, he's talking about kilograms of feed, because that's what he's used to in the animal world. And we're like, Mike, what? Can you tax out a bowl of oatmeal? Like, nobody understands what you're talking about, because that's the world he lives in, right? So thank you for doing this, because it's going to be so helpful for like so many people, so many athletes, for our research, for future research, for people to be able to start tracking all of that. It's a really big piece of the puzzle for people to understand. So thank you. Thanks for being open and helping us.
I'll send the thanks along to Karen and Erin, because it's definitely all of them. So, but yeah, on a personal level, like anything to get nerdy about for me is just exciting. I'm like, this is like the next thing I can nerd out on. Where do you think the future is going in phytate research, phytase research? Like, what are you doing next?
Well, I've learned that I have to be fairly bold with this. Like, it took me a long time to really realize like that no one was paying as much attention to this as me. And I don't mean that in a cocky way, but being at this nutrition congress in Paris, Mike and I were there together, and even the people leading. So in a lot of countries, not a lot, in a few countries, they're adding phytase into staple foods like rice or wheat, which is great to see. But you're not necessarily going to be getting enough of it. It's taking a long time. There's all these regulatory issues. Yeah. Can't control the dose if a child doesn't finish their meal, like all of that. So I think the conversations are starting, but what we realized there was just how surface level their knowledge is still compared to what we now know about it. And it is honestly like unbelievable what it does. We haven't even scratched the surface. If you want to nerd out, we'll get Mike on the call and he will tell you all the deep science of what it does on, kinases and phosphatases and like some of the IP7 research that's happening. And it's absolutely fascinating. But like I said, it's funny because, so Mike and I met about a year ago, and I said, I've been watching you on YouTube for a long time talk about superdosing in animals. And I said, is there any way you would come and work with our company? And he was like, yeah, this is great. I've always wondered about humans. He's like, I've had pails of phytase sitting in my garage for years. Like, I don't ever take it. So anyways, he's been talking to his brother, Jeff, who worked at GlaxoSmithKline in drug development and drug research. He's been telling him about phytase for 30 years. And what a big impact it could have on so many diseases. And Jeff is always like, shut up about phytase. So Mike was me, right? I talk about phytase all the time. I'm like, anybody who has an issue, I'm like, here's a bottle, take it, it'll fix you. And then like a few weeks later, they're fine. Anyways, Jeff was always telling his brother to shut up. They're both from the UK. And we got on a call with Jeff and we started talking about all our case studies and some of the science behind it. And he was just like, so now he's on our team too. And we're working on drug development, pharma, like a whole bunch of stuff, which is really exciting. So I think where it's going, honestly, is that I think we're going to see a lot of diseases start to fall. And that will start with autoimmune disease, because we are seeing so many of them literally turn off. So I think that's the first one. I think there's a lot going on with viral, like the understanding of the microbiome, the virome, how our body is responding to viruses, the immune system in general. I think there's going to be a huge growth in that area with the understanding of what phytase can do. I'm really excited for where it's going.
You can tell. You can tell. I think that, anyone that's living their passion, I think, even though it's been arduous, it sounds at times, I think you're definitely doing the right thing because it radiates out of you, which I think is really special. And I feel better equipped. I think you've given me a lot of food for thought, again, pun intended. Even just like zinc absorption and stuff, because I've really emphasized, I got hit. I'm not sure, honestly, if it was COVID, but a year and a half ago, I went to Iceland, and that's only relevant because I have never been that sick in my entire life in terms of like, I think it might have been COVID because I lost my sense of smell for probably like 6 to 7 months. It was crazy. I felt like I was like drowning in my own body. It was wild. And then that's when I was talking to my coworker, and he was like, yeah, I take this like supplement, and all it is these 3 nutrients. And then I'm like, okay, like I do believe that nutrition is medicine. So started doing that, and yeah, it's been honestly transformative. And now what you're saying, because I know what the different vitamins and minerals, like what their base functions are, but don't necessarily always appreciate, what like the intake can actually do, because I think it's one of the interesting things is we don't have like crystal ball ever to know like how we would feel if like we took path B or path A. Like there's no 2 alternate pathways, but I'm trying to get everyone to take this supplement now when they start getting sick, because it's like, it honestly helps. But now what you're telling me is it could help more even. So
zinc is, there's so many studies out there on different viruses and how taking zinc can help with that. But again, it's just going to keep getting bound up by the phytic acid if you don't fully deplete that. So it's really interesting to hear the number of people that have been on it for a number of years, and they're like, I don't ever get sick, So for the little amount, rather than, I guess the interesting piece is like, if you're taking a multivitamin or you're taking a bunch of supplements, you're guessing as to how much your body needs and how much it's absorbing and all of that, right? And our food for sure is way more depleted. We know this, the soils are depleted, so it's not as good as it used to be. So, you kind of have that double whammy. But the good thing about phytase is that it just liberates the native amounts of nutrients in the food, and they're all in the correct ratios, right? So you're not guessing like, why am I magnesium deficient? Or how much do I need? Do I need 500? Do I need 1,000? Then I take too much, I'm going to get diarrhea. And like, you're always trying to balance all these supplements, right? Whereas if you're just releasing what's already present in your food and your body's actually absorbing it, there's just that natural order to things that I think, nature intended. So it's just like having a giant wall. So phytic acid is the wall, and you're just knocking that wall down, and then you have access to those nutrients. But I think it's worth it to not be sick for a month and not or a week, or the number of people that are still dealing with long COVID. There's some really, really interesting, not to go on a big tangent here, but when you look at what happens when a virus enters your body and your body turns on acute inflammation to go in and like take care of the virus, right? In autoimmune disease or in long COVID, it just never turns off. So the cytokine, people didn't die of the actual virus in COVID. They died of the cytokine storm that was attacking all their organs. So the inflammation got turned on and never got turned off. And so we think what's happening now in a very high level simplistic way is that phytase is that off switch that people are missing. But it's so interesting because viruses, like I said, have been part of the microbiome for hundreds of millions of years.
Mm-hmm. But definitely in the forefront of everyone's mind. I was traveling recently, and there's people in the airplane sneezing, and I'm like, don't get me sick. So then I was just upping my nutrients. one of the things that I think myself, obviously you have me convinced, you have a customer out of me now, so that's great. But I think I'm going to look at it like just like a companion to Chronometer, I think, for me. And I hope that some of our users do as well. Like that is just kind of an assurance that what I'm eating, I'm absorbing, like obviously it's not like 100%, but I think that that's like something that a lot of our users struggle with often. And they're like, well, like, but your body can do this and that. And I'm like, yeah, everyone is individual and 100%. But this will give me, I think, like more peace of mind that like the number of milligrams that I'm getting is the number of milligrams that I'm absorbing.
Well, it's better ROI on your food, right? If you can increase, like if you're spending all that money on food and you can increase the ROI by 150%, how would you not want to do that, right? Like instead of getting, say, 30% of the nutrients out of your food, why not get 100?
Yeah. I always say that with supplementation with people too. Like people are like supplementing like blindly almost. And I'm like, that's when I encourage people to like log in Chronometer. I'm like, you might be getting a lot of these nutrients already from your food. And then you're like overdoing it, particularly like vitamin C and vitamin B. And
then you just have expensive pee.
The water soluble vitamins. Exactly. Exactly. I'm like, you're paying a lot for that that bright yellow pee. Where can people find you, Amy? Obviously, we want to drive people to get a Phytase supplement. Where can people buy that? Where can people find your research? Is it all in one place?
Yeah,
Tell us.
We're on goodphyte.com. So it's GOODPHYTE for phytase.com. There is a research tab there that's got a lot of information. So you can go in and research on it. There's a lot of research online. Like I said, we've done the literature review that's kind of taken all the studies out there in humans and put them all together. So you can read that. And then we're also at Join the Good Phyte on Instagram. A lot of the testimonials are on there, which are really fun to read through because they're real life. There's people's photos, what they went through, what changed, how quickly, blah, 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 what they took. And then, yeah, I guess if you have any questions, you can reach out to our team of 2 full-time people. So give us a bit of time to respond because there's someone in the MS community that's just started talking about this again, and he's got a huge following. And so it's really exploded in the MS community.
Really?
Which is great because we're hearing amazing things from that community and life-changing stories, which is awesome to hear. But we do our best to respond as quickly as we can, but we're also, trying to do all the research and development and all of that. So, but I always try to help. And please, if something good happens, please send us that story because we love those stories. Just like keep our team going. So we have 4 scientific advisors that are amazing to have on the team that we meet regularly, at least once a week with. But the full-time people that are doing the day-to-day operations is just 2 of us. So we're just doing our best. Yeah.
Busy. Oh, no, you're doing great. Yeah. We have a channel in Slack. That's our office messenger. And it's like, we call it Good Vibes Only. And like I said, I get a front row seat to like most of the good vibes, but customer services too. And we just like share people's stories. And I'm always like urging the development teams and QA teams and stuff to have like a look at that because you're so in the weeds with the day-to-day tasks of building something that it's hard, I think, for them to hear like the impact. And I think anytime that you're like having like real impact on someone's health, life, longevity, that it really gives you a lot of reason to continue doing what you're doing. So, and I love that you're that there's been some positive movements. Sounds like for people with multiple sclerosis, because I actually worked with a woman. She ended up passing away from the illness, but I worked with her at my previous job. She came in a couple times a week. And I think that's part of the reason, like what has shaped me feeling gratitude about my own body was just working closely with her. She obviously had like a beautiful attitude still, even though she was no longer mobile. And I was just like, I'm just really fortunate that my body is working. But I just felt really sad because at that time, I mean, this is already a long time ago. This is already like 15 years ago, but at that time there was like no alleviation of anything. And it was like seemed from the limited amount of information that I know to be something that like really varies depending on like flare-ups. And I don't know if flare-ups is the right term, and I hope that I didn't offend anybody by saying that, but yeah, like you could have like fine days and then like brutal weeks.
Oh yeah, or you can't. The depression that is described to be me by all the MS community is that it's like your bones are being crushed into the ground. Like the depression feeling it's a physical depression. The pain and the exhaustion is so deep that you just. I don't know. My grandmother, so my mom's mom, died of lupus, which is an autoimmune disease, when my mom was 7. So I never met her. And it really impacted my mom, of course. And right after my son was born, they thought I had lupus. So all my ANA results were high. And it was right at the time that I started Good Phyte. And so obviously started taking high doses of phytase. And by the time I actually got into the rheumatologist, all my ANA results had normalized and I was feeling good again. So I did take the hydroxychloroquine, which is also through that COVID time, and thinking I was immunosuppressed and all of it. But it's never come back. But I was in that same place where I was like, I can't even run up this hill. Like my iron's fine. Everything else is fine. Like why? I wasn't sleeping and breastfeeding all through the you know how it is. Your body's recovering from childbirth.
No, you're not. Yeah, I do. Yeah, no, terrible time.
But this was a whole new level of like crazy, like coffee didn't work, food didn't work, like nothing. So I don't know, but I know that I did have high ANA before and that it was a hereditary thing. So we had someone with lupus go into remission after 6 months on phytase. And so it's good to know that you don't have to die of those anymore. It's crazy that my grandma died when that would have been like 1960 that she passed away. So yeah.
That doesn't even feel like that long ago. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. But to come that far. What a thing to go through for you as like a new mom. It's funny because I actually, after I had Emmy, I started having like muscle twitches everywhere. And then my doctor sent me to like a neurologist because it was like really unusual. And then they were like tossing around, not the neurologist, but the physician was like, ALS, MS, like those kinds of things, which not what you want to hear when you have like a 9. Nobody wants to hear that ever. But I had like a 9-month-old and I was like so scared, because you want to be around for your kids, obviously. And then I went to my neurologist and he's like, I'm so, because it takes forever. Obviously, free healthcare is amazing, but the wait list can take a really long time, right? So it was like nine months I waited and was anxious and doing a lot of research on these diseases. And I went to my neurologist. He's like, I'm so sorry you've been living in fear. He's like, I think you have magnesium.
I was just going to say that. That sounded exactly, yeah.
And I did. And I did. And then when I started taking magnesium, it was transformative.
That's so important for women
living
health and calm and muscles and heart and absolutely.
Yeah. So like woefully low, like 35% of my daily recommended intake only. So
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
And just a nutrient deficiency, like it's crazy. Anyway, this has been incredible. You're amazing. What you're doing is amazing. And I'm happy we've joined you fighting this.
Fighting the good fight?
I don't want to say fighting the nutrient, but fighting the good fight and raising awareness about this. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you getting the word out. And I hope it helps other people too. Because like you said, like muscle twitches and thinking you have ALS, like that's terrifying. And if it is just a micronutrient deficiency or absorption issue, if it can help a few people, that would be great. So thank you so much.
Sounds like it already has, and hopefully it can help in our community too. I'm confident that it will.
Okay, thanks, Eliisa.
Thanks, Amy. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Discovering Nutrition. A huge thanks to Amy for joining us and shedding light on a topic that most of us have never been taught: how anti-nutrients and enzymes can influence whether we actually absorb the nutrients we log and track every day. One exciting update on our side is that phytate tracking is now available in Cronometer, so we have one extra nutrient or anti-nutrient for you to geek out on. So you can see not just what micronutrients you're eating, but also factors that might influence how well you're absorbing them. If you're curious after this conversation, be sure to head to your daily report or nutrition report and explore this new data layer in your own diet. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a fellow nutrition nerd, leave us a rating or review, and check out the show notes for more resources on phytate, phytase, and nutrient absorption. Can't wait to see you next time.